Joe Rogan Experience 2456, Michael Jai White. Joe Rogan 2 hours 47 minutes. Michael Jai White somehow sensed the 1994 Northridge earthquake before it happened. He jumped out of bed, ran out of his apartment, leaped off the balcony, and watched from the parking lot as the building shook and the lights went out. Everyone else was trapped inside. He still cannot explain it. Section 1, The Earthquake Instinct and Surviving Bridgeport. The conversation opens with one of the wildest personal stories Rogan has ever heard on the podcast. Michael Jai White was living in LA when the 1994 earthquake hit, but he was already outside, standing in the parking lot before the earthquake actually struck. The woman he was with confirmed the timeline. She heard the door slide open, then everything shook and she was trapped by a closet door that fell across the hallway. White and a friend had to pry it open to free her. When he talked to the building guard afterwards, the guard confirmed that the building shook and the lights went out simultaneously. White was already outside watching it happen. Rogan connects it to animal instinct, referencing the 2004 Thailand tsunami where animals fled to high ground before the wave hit. For White, this kind of sixth sense has been a lifelong survival tool. He has been on his own since age 14, growing up in Bridgeport, Connecticut, a city with one of the highest murder rates per capita in the country. He was always the one who sensed danger before it arrived. "Hey, let us leave," he would tell friends, then a shootout would happen right where they had been standing. He could detect predators instinctively. Nothing like that earthquake premonition has happened since, but the street instincts that kept him alive as a teenager living alone in one of America's most dangerous cities never left him. Section 2, a 15-year-old running a 200-student karate school. By 15, White was teaching nearly 200 karate students at a community center in Bridgeport. Nobody knew he was a teenager. He had not grown since 13 or 14 and looked like a full-grown man. He was fighting in heavyweight tournaments against adults and winning, getting his name in the paper. The community center staff assumed he was an adult and started paying him under the table. This early independence created a strange parallel life. He became a father at 15 because one of his students' older sisters had a crush on the instructor, not realizing how young he actually was. There are people in Bridgeport who genuinely believe he must be in his 70s by now because they remember him as a grown man in the late 1980s. White traces his martial arts obsession to necessity. With no one looking out for him, fighting was survival, not sport. He trained in everything, driven by an analytical mind he did not yet know was artistic. When you are a sensitive kid in a harsh environment, he explains, you build armor, you lock everything precious in a safe and you become the safe. His brothers, who became engineers, could let things roll off their backs. White could not. He was volatile, furious, channeling all of it into martial arts. That same sensitivity is what later allowed him to understand Mike Tyson so deeply when preparing to play him. The moniker of the monster, White says, is only there to hide what is really deep inside. That is why the toughest fighters are the ones who cry on camera. Section 3, the No-Telegraph Punch and explaining jabs to Sugar Ray. White's signature concept in martial arts is the No-Telegraph Punch. No loading up, no cocking back, no visible wind-up. The strike arrives without any preliminary movement, making it virtually impossible to defend against even if the opponent knows it is coming. He developed it through years of studying efficiency of motion, heavily influenced by his track and field background. In shot put, he competed against much larger athletes whose arm length gave them a natural advantage. He had to generate power through perfect technique and angles. In sprinting, any backward motion at the start costs you the race. He applied these principles to fighting and found cheat codes that nobody else had. Rogan first saw White demonstrate this to Kimbo Slice on a movie set. Kimbo, who White describes as a wonderful human being with enormous respect, was trying to touch White with a rubber knife. Every time Kimbo started to move, White would see a tiny tell, a microscopic indication, and throw a punch that arrived first. Kimbo kept asking, "How are you hitting me before I can get this knife out?" White explains that even world-class fighters telegraph. Watch any pad session and the trainer moves just as much as the fighter because they are both giving away their intentions. Through his best friend Frankie Lyles, the WBA super middleweight champion who held the title for 5 years, White ended up teaching jab mechanics to Sugar Ray Leonard. The absurdity was not lost on him. "I'm explaining this to Sugar Ray," he says. "This feels ridiculous. But the principle transcended ego. If you can develop a skill and the other person cannot stop it even after you tell them exactly what you are doing, then it is a truly legitimate technique." Section 4, the Wesley Snipes fight and the Blade legacy. One of the podcast's most entertaining revelations is that Joe Rogan was genuinely training for a celebrity fight against Wesley Snipes. Campbell McLaren from the UFC connected them after Snipes was originally meant to fight Jean-Claude Van Damme. McLaren told them nobody gives a damn about that fight and pushed for Rogan as the opponent. Rogan said yes and trained twice a day for 6 months. Mornings with Rob came in doing striking, nights doing jiu-jitsu. He was perpetually exhausted, which gave him new respect for professional fighters. Snipes apparently believed Rogan was just a grappler and planned to catch him with a knee during a takedown attempt. Rogan laughs at the misconception. He wanted to stand up. "I am way better at that." The negotiations involved lawyers and went on for months. Rogan even called Snipes out during a UFC broadcast on air. But Snipes eventually pulled out. White, who knew Snipes since before he was famous, believes the fight was connected to Snipes' tax troubles. White is fiercely protective of Snipes and credits him with literally saving Marvel through the original Blade film, a fact even Stan Lee acknowledged. Superhero movies became the biggest franchise in Hollywood history, and it all started with Wesley Snipes walking into a vampire blood rave in 1998. White recalls the opening scene as one of the best in any action movie of all time. The sprinklers start spraying blood, they are about to kill some guy, and all of a sudden Wesley shows up. What frustrates both men is that Blade and Spawn, two of the most distinctive superhero properties of the 1990s, have essentially disappeared from pop culture while generic franchise films dominate. Section 5. Why Spawn Vanished and Hollywood's McDonald's Problem. White played Spawn in the 1997 film, and both he and Rogan are genuinely baffled about why the character no longer exists in the cultural conversation. Creator Todd McFarlane has been talking about making another Spawn film for 25 years, at one point proposing a concept where Spawn would never be shown directly, like Jaws with Jamie Foxx attached. White is diplomatically skeptical. McFarlane has never directed anything, he points out. Creating a comic book and directing a major film are completely different skills. White saw an early cut of the original that told a compelling story with only 71 special effects, but director Mark Dipp, a special effects specialist, was given carte blanche by studio head Bob Shaye and kept adding visual effects until the narrative was buried. White is still bitter about specific scenes being cut, including the emotional motivation for his character wanting to return to his old life. This leads to a broader critique of modern Hollywood. White calls superhero movies McDonald's, predictable, safe, designed for mass consumption. Rogan agrees that there are no great films among superhero films. White cannot stand the three-point stance landing that every hero does, the 90-pound woman throwing a 200-pound man, the choreography that exists only for its own sake. He is actively trying to change this in his own work, choreographing deliberate mistakes into fight scenes to make them feel real. He turned down John Wick 4 and Blood and Bone to focus on his own projects where he has creative control. He has been directing and producing films where he controls the fight choreography, informed by close-quarters combat training with Delta Force operator Tyler Gray and sessions at Terran Tactical, which both he and Rogan regard as the gold standard for firearms training. Section 6. Black Dynamite and Creating Your Own Lane. White argues passionately that artists cannot wait for the perfect role to find them. You have to create your own stuff. Nobody was going to write Black Dynamite for me. The film came to him fully formed during a car ride to set in Shanghai while listening to James Brown's Superbad. He started laughing uncontrollably in the back of the car, seeing the entire movie in his mind, including a nunchuck fight scene with Richard Nixon. The driver had no idea what was happening. The inspiration came from reflecting on the blaxploitation films he grew up idolizing, Shaft, Superfly, The Mac, and realizing something was deeply wrong. These were pimps and they were presented as heroes. 3 The Hard Way, starring Jim Brown, Fred Williamson, and Jim Kelly, was about an evil doctor planning to put a liquid in the water systems of LA, Chicago, and New York that would give sickle cell anemia to all black people. This was not a comedy, it was presented as a serious thriller. White realized that depicting this era exactly as it was would be inherently hilarious. He discussed the concept with Tarantino but went his own direction. He has now directed multiple films and has learned to navigate Hollywood's tendency to interfere. It is a miracle that any movie gets done the way it was intended, he says. Only a few directors, Tarantino being one, are left completely alone. White considers himself lucky to have reached that level of autonomy and is currently producing a sequel to As Good as Dead, a film based loosely on his brother who moved to Mexico and started a new life. Section 7. The Khabib Discipline Rant and Why Gifted Athletes Fail. One of the most powerful moments in the episode centers on a viral rant attributed to Khabib Nurmagomedov about discipline. Every man addicted to something, it begins. Some smoke, some drink, some chase girls, some waste time, but real man he addicted to discipline. To early wakes, to prayer, to training, to silence. Discipline no need motivation. Discipline move without feeling. Discipline say I go anyway. Even when tired, even when lonely. Rogan reveals it is probably AI-generated, but neither man cares. White calls it one of AI's greatest contributions to martial arts. Even if Khabib did not write it, he would endorse every word. The rant launches a deep discussion about the trap of natural talent. White was born gifted. He was a big guy who moved fast, winning heavyweight competitions as a teenager. But he came to realize that being celebrated for physical gifts was actually limiting his growth. He uses a brilliant analogy. If it takes him 1,000 kicks to get fatigued and another fighter only 100, but that fighter pushes to 120 while White pushes to 1,001, who is the better martial artist? The one who pushed further past their limit. He developed a philosophy that sounds paradoxical but rings true. I love to be wrong because every time I am wrong I learn something. My best experiences are when I get humbled. He describes training with Michael Bisping in Thailand before the George St. Pierre fight. Bisping had been drinking all day on a yacht. White, a non-drinker, expected to go easy on him. By the second round, White was so winded he told Bisping to just whoop his ass. Bisping, who fought 11 UFC fights with one functioning eye and memorized the eye chart to pass medical exams, represents the kind of toughness White most admires. Section 8. Inside Mike Tyson's Head and the Psychology of Pressure. White prepared extensively to play Mike Tyson in a biopic, traveling to the Catskill house where Tyson grew up and interviewing him in prison through a phone connection arranged by Frankie Lyles. What he found was a portrait of psychological pressure that the public never fully grasped. White tracked how Tyson's personality morphed to mirror whoever held influence. With trainer Cus D'Amato, young Tyson wore suspenders and spoke carefully, dressing like the old man who adopted him. With manager Jim Jacobs, marriage became important. With Don King, the N-word became every third word. Even speech patterns shifted completely with each new authority figure. White saw a man perpetually searching for a father figure while carrying the weight of being the youngest heavyweight champion in history with no roadmap and no peer group. The most insightful observation comes from the first Holyfield fight which White attended. In the third round, Tyson heard something he had never heard in his entire career. The crowd started chanting for the other guy, Holyfield, Holyfield. White says he literally saw the air leave Tyson. Fighting a man perceived as a holy figure created a psychological disadvantage that pure skill could not overcome. White spotted a moment when Tyson hurt Holyfield badly with a body shot and uppercut combination but failed to follow up. The old Tyson, the Tyson who destroyed Marvis Frazier on ABC, would have swarmed immediately. But the old Tyson had Cus D'Amato in his corner, cutting angles, bobbing and weaving, attacking with combinations at middleweight speed in a heavyweight body. By the Holyfield fight, that movement was gone. White believes the deterioration was both psychological and technical. Without elite coaching after Cus died, Tyson became a one-punch fighter who stood right in front of opponents. Kevin Rooney, often portrayed as a savior figure, was actually part of the problem. Rooney personally told White that he regretted doing a media interview against Tyson's wishes and admitted that he left casinos owing debts that Tyson had to bail him out of. The pressure from every direction was unrelenting. Section 9, the Dagestani Revolution and Young Fighters Rewriting the Rules. Rogan's enthusiasm reaches peak intensity discussing Azadullah Imam Ghazaliev, a 22-year-old Dagestani Muay Thai fighter competing in one championship. This tall, lanky fighter combines taekwondo kicks, karate techniques, and precision Muay Thai with devastating effectiveness. His head is never on the center line. His front kicks to the face come from angles no traditional Thai fighter has seen. His spinning back fists and axe kicks are combined with laser-accurate straight rights. Thai fighters with 150 fights of experience simply cannot figure him out because he fights differently than anyone they have trained against. Then there is Yuki Yoza, a Japanese Kyokushin karate fighter who is revolutionizing kickboxing through a completely different approach. Where Ghazaliev uses range and angles, Yoza gets inside and systematically destroys opponents' legs with relentless calf kicks combined with Russian-style boxing. He shells up, moves in tight, and chops at the inner thigh, outer calf, and lower leg until opponents cannot pivot or generate power. Thai fighters try to act tough and invite the kicks. By the second round, they are begging him to stop. Yoza also incorporates question mark kicks, Superman punches off leg kick feints, and the kind of shin conditioning that comes from years of Kyokushin full-contact training. Rogan frames both fighters as evidence of a golden age in martial arts. The Dagestani pipeline that began with Khabib Nurmagomedov is now producing fighters across all disciplines. Young innovators from different traditions are cross-pollinating techniques in ways that the martial arts world has dreamed about for decades. Both Rogan and White started their careers wondering which style was best. Now they are watching the answer unfold in real time. It is everything. Section 10, Aging, Anti-Aging, and the Modern Warrior. The conversation's final stretch touches on something both men clearly think about. White, who is older than Rogan though neither looks their age, discusses his connection to the A4M anti-aging medical community through Dr. Bob Goldman. A4M hosts conferences where doctors present cutting-edge approaches focused on treating causes rather than symptoms, often in direct opposition to pharmaceutical companies. White has connected fighters like Nick Diaz with these resources. His own doctor is 63 and looks like a superhero. When we were kids, Rogan observes, 63-year-old men were basically dead. White agrees, they were frail, feeble old men. One of White's sons went through a difficult period but has been turned around by brain stimulation therapy, a magnetic treatment that essentially rewires neural patterns. White could not remember the specific name but describes the results as remarkable. Both men agree this is the best time in history to be an older person, with unprecedented scientific understanding of how to maintain the body and mind. White closes the podcast the way he opened it, with warmth and genuine admiration for Rogan. He tells Rogan how proud he is of the kid from the gym who turned an underground passion into the biggest platform in podcasting. He calls fighters modern-day gladiators and says the best use of his time off from movies is going into inner cities and community centers to work with kids who remind him of his younger self. Because if those seeds had not been planted for him at the right moments, he knows with certainty that he would not be here. Luckily, I was saved, he says, and the least I can do is try to do the same for somebody else. Key takeaways: Michael Jai White is far more than an action movie star. He is a self-taught martial arts philosopher who grew up in one of America's most dangerous cities, became a father and karate instructor at 15, and turned raw survival instincts into a sophisticated fighting system built around invisible technique. His nearly 3-hour conversation with Rogan covers an astonishing range, from earthquake premonitions to explaining jab mechanics to Sugar Ray Leonard, from the psychology that broke Mike Tyson to the young Dagestani and Japanese fighters rewriting combat sports. The deepest thread running through it all is White's belief that natural gifts are a trap unless you choose to push past them. The gifted athlete who never struggles will always be limited. The fighter who embraces being humbled, who loves being wrong because it means learning something new, who voluntarily seeks out opponents better than himself, that is the true martial artist. And that philosophy, forged in the streets of Bridgeport and tested against champions around the world, extends far beyond the ring.